Hey, Voodoo Power listeners. Before we start the show, let me tell you about Strength Coach Pro. Strength Coach Pro is the ultimate coaching companion for passionate strength coaches. Strength Coach Pro is a powerful platform allowing coaches to sequence programs for an entire year, ensuring athletes stay on track. It features a simple drag and drop design for program building. It's easy and efficient, allowing for customized workouts. Another great feature of Strength Coach Pro is the real-time leaderboard feedback. Athletes love competition, creating a fun, engaged, and motivated environment where they can thrive. Strength Coach Pro is trusted by coaches at all levels, from professional to D1, high school, and professional trainers looking for an easy way to streamline programming needs. Whether working with 10 clients or 1,000 athletes, there are no limits to the support of this program. In addition, there's a 14-day trial for coaches where they can explore the platform for themselves. At just $50 a month or $500 a year, the value is unbeatable. Please don't miss your opportunity. Coaches can reach out to Strength Coach Pro for a demo today. Let them work to save you time and elevate your coaching. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Dillon Martinez. Coach Martinez is the Director of Adaptive Physical Education Program and Assistant Professor of the Physical Education and Sports Science Department at Winona State University. He is the sprint coach for lacrosse at Aquinas High School. And prior to Winona State, Coach Martinez spent time as a physical education and health teacher in the Blair Taylor School District and as a physical education teacher at Riverway Learning Community. Martinez has a Doctor of Education in Physical Education and Coaching from Winona State University. He has a Master's of Science in Education from the University of Wisconsin-LaCrosse and a Bachelor's degree in Health and Physical Education from Winona State University. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you, sir. It's very nice to meet you via Zoom. We've been talking a lot over phone, so this is awesome, man. Good to meet you face to face.
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time reading your articles and getting ready for this, and you have some amazing stuff out.
Thank you.
And I know in your bio I said you were a doctor. You're almost there, so I think you're close enough to be called a doctor.
Thank you. The dissertation is done. I got to defend it on April 11th, and then the official graduation is May 8th. So we're as close as we can be without it actually being done.
I'm sure that's really exciting for you. You spent a lot of time earning those accolades.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's so close. And the process was so fun. I often tell my athletes who are, my student athletes right now who are in high school, specifically my seniors who are complaining about how much time they've been in school. I said, my children, I haven't had a year off of being in school since the day I started school. So you can do it, I promise. So it's been 29 years. I think I've had 1 year off of not being in school in some way. So I'm more than ready to be done.
In the last few years, I've went back after quite a bit of a layoff, and it's taken a little bit of getting used to be required to turn assignments in and all the things that I didn't have to do for 20 years. So
right.
Somebody that stayed in school, that's a really good achievement because you just kept at it until you hit your goal.
Exactly. Then you can just be done.
And then once you're done, which I'm sure you'll never be done. I'm sure you'll find another class or another subject to dive into.
That's the plan.
You sent me quite a bit of stuff. I got through the majority of it. I didn't get through everything, but you write for Simply Faster. You have quite a few articles for them, and everything I read was really good, and you hit some really intriguing ideas. The one thing that caught my eye right off the bat was you did a review of The Anatomy of Speed, a book written by Bill Parisi. I was able to talk to him about that book. I really enjoyed that book. What made you dive into that and review Bill's writing?
Yeah. So one, he is just a mecca when it comes to speed coaching. And I was trying to find the most reputable book for the speed coaching class that I created at Winona State University. So as you said, I run the adaptive PE program. So I teach future PE teachers how to specifically work with students with disabilities in a physical education setting. But then under that, I also teach in the coaching minor program and then the general PE program as well. And within the coaching program, I saw a huge need for a class specifically focused on how to teach future coaches how to teach the specialized skill of sprinting. So many coaches start in the field and they only reciprocate what they were taught when they were an athlete. And most coaches aren't taught explicitly how to teach the skill of sprinting. whether it be in a track setting or in a specialized skills setting, such as football, soccer, or baseball, or something like that. So I thought it'd be a great idea to add that class to our coaching repertoire and offerings. So when I was creating that class, I needed a textbook to go off of. And in all of my searching, you have books that go way too deep, and then you have books that aren't deep enough. And I feel like Parisi's book was just perfect. It was just applicable enough. I think it's 13 chapters. Our semesters are 16 weeks long. So a chapter a week with a couple weeks off worked out perfectly. The content is exactly what I wanted to teach my undergrads anyway. So it was very complementary to how I was already setting the class up. So when I found that, it was a seamless addition, and the students have really liked it. I try as much as I can to not have my students buy textbooks, because most of the time, as soon as that class is over, that textbook is worthless to that student. I'm sure you can relate to something like that. But I go over and above to say, I promise I'm not having you buy something you'll never use again. I use this book almost every week in my coaching endeavors and in my teaching endeavors. So it's cheap, it's great content, and if you're stay in the coaching field, you're going to want to use this book for the rest of your career.
I really enjoyed it when I dug into it. He covers quite a few ideas, not just all, sprinting. He gets into fascia,
Right.
He gets into lateral slings. He really goes deep in some areas, but it's still readable. It doesn't get so far that you're like, what is he talking about?
Exactly. It's just deep enough. It's perfect.
Yeah. So when I saw you review that, I'm like, that's great, because reading through it myself, I had some ideas, and you mentioned one of them there, but a big takeaway you had in your article was sprinting is a specialized skill that gets treated like a fundamental skill.
Exactly.
And I think more times than not, the guys that listen to the show, they take sprinting very seriously, but you get away from, things like that. Guys and girls, they don't put as much stock into the skill of learning to sprint as maybe they should. Is that kind of what you've seen overall? Is the fast kids are fast and that's it?
Yes. Unfortunately, we all grew up hearing that you can't teach speed. When I played football at University of Minnesota Duluth, and I was talking to the athletic trainer one day, and they're like, "Yeah, you're Dillon Martinez. They're excited to have you." And I was like, "Well, thank you. Why is that?" And they're like, "Well, because you're fast and you can't teach speed." And I was like, "My dad is one of the best sprint coaches in the state of Wisconsin, if not the country, and I've watched him do it for 10 plus years. Take kids that played O-line, and now they're running in the state track meet as a part of the 4x1. I've seen it over and over again. I've seen him take athletes who no one would call fast, and then they're running at the state track meet. He's teaching the skill of speed. So I saw it happen firsthand. I started doing it personally. And then now, through my doctoral work, I'm finding out that more often than not, successful sprint coaches are successful because they have a plan on how to teach the specialized skill of sprinting. And we can get into that more later. But yeah, the idea that speed is only a God-given skill is just not true.
The further you get into it, the more you see that. And I realize you're going to reach a certain point that, your genetics and everything play a part. But
for sure.
At the high school level, I still think we're quite a ways away from that, and it can be developed.
I was just going to say your genetics definitely set the floor and set the ceiling, but the gap between the floor and the ceiling, I think, is more substantial than most people realize.
And the more you get to talking to young athletes, the ones that are kind of fast and they like track, they can't explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. So if you would take a kid that you could teach those attributes, through the block, moving into acceleration, taking it into top speed, and then pushing the race. Well, you can take a pretty mediocre kid and get them looking pretty good really fast.
For sure.
Now, when you're looking at that, how do you plan your practices? Are you looking at breaking down the fundamentals so that you are hitting your block starts and dynamic warm-ups maybe one day? I don't know what your schedule is. I'm just throwing stuff out here. Taking your acceleration into another day and then working on some top speed stuff a different day, or are you doing it all at once? How are you building a sprinter?
So first and foremost, technique is the thing that I care the most about. Something I tell my athletes is no matter if they're in first place or if they're in last place, I want everybody in the stands to know that that sprinter is an Aquinas sprinter by the way that they look. Now, obviously, everything from a mechanics standpoint is going to look different based on the morphology of each individual's body. So it's not going to be like a mirror image for sure. But I want, more than anything, I want it to look smooth and unlabored. I want it to look like pure efficiency as much as possible, because I think that that technically efficient sprinters are safer athletes, no matter if they're track athletes or field sport athletes. If they can run efficiently and run safely, or I'm sorry, with technical proficiency, they're going to be safer. And ultimately, that's what I care about the most at the end of the season, is the team that wins the state meet is oftentimes not necessarily just the fastest team, but the healthiest team. So I take all of that into consideration when I start building my my season. I start with a backwards design, just like I teach my physical education majors when they're building up their curriculum. You got to start with the end in mind, and the end in mind for us is a state championship for our team. And to get there, you got to be healthy and you got to be fast. So in order to be healthy and fast, how do I create my ideal sprint program? So every day we start with something called tech. I despise the word warm up. When I was an athlete and when I was coaching earlier in my coaching career, I would say, or a coach would say, all right, guys, it's time to warm up. And I could feel like this is just the thing that we got to do before we do the important stuff. Or I would say it as a coach and I would say, all right, guys, let's get on the line. It's time to warm up. And I could see that there was no heightened intensity going on in between the ears of my athletes. If we have an hour and a half of work, I don't want to waste, quote unquote, 15 minutes just to get ready before we actually start doing the important stuff. So a little trick I use is, instead of calling it a warm up, I call it tech. And my athletes know when I say it's time to start and we're doing tech, they know that that thing that we're doing for the next 15 minutes is just as important as the main workout that we're going to be doing that day. So tech is many things in one. It's a central nervous system primer. It's a way to reinforce the habits that I want my sprinters to be able to sprint with. So I use something that my dad developed called the 7 Ups of how I teach sprinting and the skill of sprinting. And then from there, there's also plyometric work, and specifically what I'm more excited about during tech is the isometric work, because it's incredibly efficient at working the angles and the positions that I want my sprinters to be very strong in, and there's no pounding on the body. So isometrics during tech have been a game changer for us. And the progression of watching a freshman girl the first day of practice trying to hold, I call it an AISO, for 30 seconds. And then by the end of the season, she's way up on her toe. The heel is way off the ground. She looks like Tyson Gay mid-sprint, and she's just locked in for 30 seconds. And that ankle is not even quivering by the end of the season. So being able to see that tangibly over the course of the season, and that's not something we're specifically planning for outside of track in the weight room or anything like that. That's just something we do every day for a minute on each side. So over time, those isometrics definitely add up. So we start a day with tech. It takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on the day. And then from there, we get into our speed work of the day. So that could be my progression for this season is we do the first 3 weeks is 10-meter flies. The next 3 weeks is 15. Then the next 3 weeks is 20. And then we go 15, 10, and then we're at the state meet. So I progress the distance of the flies on our speed days. And then, so that'd be Mondays. On Tuesdays, we do block work. So again, we do 20-meter pushes from blocks, 30-meter pushes from blocks. And then because it's fun, we do 2 weeks in a row of 40-yard dashes from blocks, because everyone likes to know how fast they run the 40. And that is usually either on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And then on Thursdays, we do 150-meter flies for time. No more than 3 in one day. Yeah, 3 is the most that we're going to do this year. And then I map everything out based on something that we're all familiar with as strength coaches, as it pertains to. I map everything out based on time under tension. So when I'm planning out my practices, I'm trying to think how much time the slowest athlete will be at maximum effort, and then that's how many seconds of time under tension I will give to that specific practice. And then I add it up throughout the week, and then that's how I make my load, peak, deload phase, and kind of go from there.
I want to dig a lot deeper into that because that's very intriguing. But before we go on, let me hit on a few things you talked about in there. So the isometric work, I'm a big fan. I didn't know I was going to be in the beginning, but it seems like I agree with you. You can teach positions, you can coach positions, you can get strength in those positions.
Yeah.
You can also see the weakness. So then whether you're creating a stronger athlete through the isometric or the weight room, the isometric will show you where they're lacking.
Absolutely.
I listened to a Josh Bryant podcast the other day, and he was talking to Dave Tate, and he got into isometrics, and he started talking about that is the quickest way to get people strong in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
So you talked about it in some of your articles. You're taking kids out of basketball season, out of wrestling season, taking them right to the track. Well, if you've got to get them strong fast after a season, isometrics seems to be a really good tool.
Absolutely. Last year, both of the boys and the girls basketball team played in the state championship. This year, the boys played in the state championship and won it. And I'm saying that because we are just now going to be getting those basketball athletes, and it's 3 weeks into the season. So, like you just said, how can I most efficiently get those athletes back, quote unquote, up to speed while not putting any more stress on their body than what they just went through for the last 3 months? And isometrics have been an incredible way to do that. But also my plan with those athletes is for the first 3 weeks of the season, we only practice 3 days a week for 3 weeks. So now that those 3 weeks are done, starting tomorrow, which is Monday, we're going to go every day. But those basketball athletes, for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to treat them as if it was the beginning of the season, and they're only going to practice 3 days a week. Because again, like I said at the beginning, I want to make sure that we are the freshest, the fastest, and the healthiest going into the state meet. And the best way to do that is to mitigate unneeded time under tension at the beginning of the season when our athletes aren't ready for the volume and intensity associated with sprinting.
You can't get that recovery. If you bury them too quick in the beginning, you can't fill the hole up fast enough at the end.
That's a great way. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Now, you'd mentioned the 150 meter flies in there. I was going to ask, is that 150 meters top speed, or is that 150 meters not to exceed a designated number, kind of like a 110?
So we're going to use a 5 meter build-in, and then I use the Dasher laser system. So there'll be a 5 meter build-in, and then from that laser to the last laser, it's everything they got. And we only do that workout about 3 times in a year. And the most we ever do is 3 with full recovery in between. So it's the best way, I think, to train how to keep maximum velocity mechanics when you get fatigued, and not fatigued meaning like in the traditional sense of cardiovascularly, like you're just gassed and the next rep is burdensome. But over 150 meters, you're going to start to get tired and start to break down. But that's just a really good way to enforce and to force your your athletes to get into the positions that they know they should be when they're starting to get tired, and help them carry through the last portion of the race.
Okay, so that did answer that. What I was looking at now is you started touching on time under tension, and we can move that way for sure.
Yeah.
I was wondering how that weighs out across the different sprints, the 100, the 200, the 400. In some cases you're brushing against it in the 800, and then you're getting onto your distance. But how do you decide time under tension between all of that?
So like on meet days, are you saying?
No, when you're planning out your season, you want your 100 kids in a season to be 20, whatever, let's say 20 minutes time under tension for the season. Are your 200 athletes the same, or are they are they extended because their race is longer?
So most of my 100 kids are also 200 kids. And we have about 3 kids that run the 4 that also run the 2. But 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, we had a kid who won the state championship in the 100 and the 200, and he broke the school record in the 400 as well. He's now a All-American. He got 3rd or 4th at indoor nationals in the 400 just 2 weeks ago. And I trained him just like I trained a pure 100-meter runner. At a lot of the people who are focused on 400 and down realize that no matter how much training that you do in the 400, the last 150 meters are going to suck no matter what you do. So how can we ensure that they're getting through that first 200 in the time needed to run a really good 400-meter time? And then how can we ensure that the students and the athletes have proper technique during the last 100 meters to ensure that they're actually being efficient and not slowing down as much. But as far as the practices go, so like I just said, the first 3 weeks are done. Let me just give you a quick overview of what the first 3 weeks have been. And I wrote this down so I could make sure that we had exact numbers. So week 3 is done. We had 9 practices in those 3 weeks because we practiced 3 days a week. We had 71 seconds of time under tension, which is about 7 seconds a day. And that is for my 100, 200, and 400-meter kids. So that's 7 seconds a day of time under tension. And now many coaches would think that that's not enough time to actually make meaningful improvements. Well, let's look what happened. So again, we are practicing at an indoor facility and we only have about 40 yards of turf to work with because we don't have a track at our high school, which sucks. It really sucks. When you're a track coach, you don't got a track. So we have 40 yards of turf to work with. So we do 5 meters into 10-meter flies. We do 15-meter into 10-meter flies, and then we do 20-meter pushes. So after those 9 days of practice in the 10-meter flies, as an average, our team is 3% faster. 87% of our students have improved. In the 20-meter block start, 100% of our athletes have gotten faster. And the average improvement is 0.12 seconds, which is just over 1/10 of a second. And for a lot of non-track people, when I say, and I go around and I do my coaching certification and I say that it's nothing to take 1/10 of a second off of an athlete's 10-meter fly time just by fixing their technique. A tenth of a second is a huge deal. And to put this into a more quantitative or qualitative viewpoint. So let's take an athlete who can run a 10-meter fly in a second and another athlete who can run a 10-meter fly in 1.1 seconds. So the difference is 1/10 of a second. After 1 second, the separation is 0.91 meters. So it's almost a full meter of separation between athlete A and athlete B. And anybody who's in team sports knows that separation is the name of the game. Whether you're on offense, you're trying to create separation. And if you're on defense, you're trying to mitigate separation as much as possible. So after 1 second at max velocity, just being 1/10 of a second faster, you're 0.91 meters separated from your opponent. After 3 seconds, you're 2.73 meters separated from your opponent. After 3 seconds. After 5 seconds, you're 4.5 meters separated from your opponent. So 1/10 of a second is huge, especially when we're playing sports like football or soccer, where literally they call football the game of inches. Where if you can take an athlete and give them 4.5 meters of separation, now it's a game of meters and not just a game of inches. It's 1/10 of a second improvement in 9 sessions average. Obviously, some of our athletes have gotten faster. Some of our athletes haven't quite hit that 10th, but every 3 weeks, if we can get 1/10 of a second faster, that's a huge improvement team-wide quickly.
And to move away from track for just a second, you really see it in baseball and softball as well. If 1/10 of a second is 3 feet, we're saying it's right around a meter, just under a meter. That's pushing 3 feet. How many bang bang plays at first do you see that if you had 3 feet to play with wouldn't even be close?
Exactly. And I one time had a soccer coach at a school I was doing my certification at say that that sprinting didn't pertain to their sport as a soccer coach. And so last weekend I did another certification with a group of 12 soccer coaches in our area. And the first 15 minutes, I just made sure to really hone in the idea that soccer athletes need to be really proficient sprinters as well. Because the research has identified, and I didn't know this going into the research, that the most common skill associated with goals being scored is in fact sprinting, which I thought was fascinating. So if we can get our soccer players more proficient sprinters, then the propensity of goals being able to be scored is going to go up as well, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, you're hammering pretty hard on some yeses ideas. His soccer book is incredible, and he is very much in line with what you're saying. If you make better, more efficient sprinters, you're going to score more goals and have less injuries.
Especially that last part, the more injuries part. A research article just came out last week talking about how when they broke down the mechanisms for injuries in soccer players, more often than not, it was technical abnormalities in how they were sprinting.
And you can believe that because we go back to what Bill Parisi said. You know, it's a specialized skill where from the time these kids are little, you just throw them out on the field and you're like, go kick that ball,
go run. Exactly.
You know how to run, so just go do it. And there's no thought into developing a more efficient runner.
Exactly. And my aha moment was, like I said, in my day job of preparing future PE teachers, K-12. So I'm preparing teachers who are going to teach kindergartners and 12th graders. Nowhere in the standards that we are teaching them to teach to is sprinting identified. So where would most likely a young kid be taught how to sprint if there was an opportunity? My vote would be in physical education, but we are teaching them how to run, not how to sprint, which are different skills entirely. It's like teaching how to throw versus how to throw a slider. They're the same basic premises, but the finished product and the application of the product are completely different. So it's on us as coaches to learn how to teach the specialized skill of sprinting proficiently enough to actually elicit the responses to create faster and safer athletes.
Yes, kids are just always asked to run fast. There's no teaching in a lot of areas now. Like we said, you know, we have a very specific group of coaches that listen to this, and it's probably remedial to them. But
right, exactly.
It's never talked through the phases. It's just go. It's, you know, and Villani gets deep into that. He had to go back to the very basics of teaching some of these ideas to get football players better at the combine. And it's crazy that you can make it to that level and have to go pay somebody to teach you how to sprint.
Yes, exactly. Every year I help get some of the kids at Winona State ready for their pro days. And then I'll say, all right, let me see a sprint real quick just to see what we're working with. And it looks awful. And I said, all right, has anyone ever taught you how to sprint? And they look at me sideways. They're like, why would anyone need to teach me how to sprint? And then I show them the video and I break down the inefficient areas of how they're moving. And they're like, this is awful. How come no one has ever taught me how to sprint? And I was like, exactly. And now we've got to try to cram it into 4 weeks, which is something that should have been doing for 18 or 19, 20 years. So yeah, Tony has been at the forefront of this. So just trying to emulate what he's doing as much as possible.
Well, and it's starting to dawn on me how crazy it is. I had a kid come in the other day. They put her in the 100, told her to run fast.
Right.
And she spit a timeout. And I'm like, well, how do you think you did? And she's like, I'm just slow. I'm like, are you slow or do you not know what you're doing? And that look, the same look that you talked about comes on our face. Well, what do you mean? You just run. We just had a quick whiteboard session of like, this is how the 100 should go for you. And I left it at that. She come back the next week and she's like, I ran a second faster.
Exactly.
It's just, we didn't even work on anything. We just told her what to do. And so that, I guess that closing that gap can be done just by understanding what it is that needs to be done.
That was said perfectly. Exactly. And helping kids understand that they are not just inherently slow. If, like you just said, they run 100 and their time isn't good. They have just never been given the opportunity to learn the skill that is specifically needed to run a good 100-meter dash time.
And that could lead into some questions that I have now because, you know, obviously I need a lot of work in these areas, but the 100 I kind of can piece together and understand. The 200 gets a little foggier for me. You can only drag out acceleration so long. Yes. You can only stay at top speed so long. And then you're going to start decelerating. Mm-hmm. How do you set that up where the middle part of the race, the rollover up into top speed, takes your sprinter closer to the finish line? What are you looking to do to help that 200 kid improve?
We're trying to increase, this is a kind of a boilerplate answer, but we're trying to increase max velocity. Because at the end of the day, the faster you complete a 200-meter dash, the less time you have to get fatigued. So a lot of our athletes who are weaker coming into the season, if we can get them faster, it's just less time that they have to hold on before they get to the finish line. So if we can increase max velocity, two things are going to happen. The time in which that they're actually going to be exerting effort is going to decrease, but also because we have been piling up sprint work, their speed reserve will go up as well. Their endurance will go up as well, just as a byproduct of getting their body used to moving in that way. But then also, like you said, you can only hold top speed, like at an elite level, like the Olympians are holding top speed for about 3 to 4 seconds maximum. So in the 100-meter dash, we're trying to push for 16 steps. In the 200-meter dash, we're trying to push for 16 steps as well, but we're trying to be a little bit more, my higher level sprinters, this isn't necessarily as much of an issue because I just say, I need you to go as fast as you can for as long as you can. And then once you start to feel like you're slowing down, I need you to run perfectly with about the felt exertion of about 95%. We know if we look at data, when an athlete tries harder, they actually slow down a little bit. So in the 200-meter dash, I say the last about 50 meters, I want you to think about 95%, and they're going to feel much lighter. Whereas the athlete next to them, they're going to be like, all right, this is the hardest part of the race. Now I got to really buckle down and really try. And then that's when they start to tense up a little bit. And then you'll see the smoother, calmer, more relaxed athlete start to pull away a little bit. And then when you ask them post-race, what was the difference between the athlete next to you, and you'll say, you can show them the video or you can just ask them and they'll say, I stayed relaxed and the person next to me didn't. So it's not necessarily we need to get them stronger, which, like I said at the beginning, we definitely need to. We need to teach them that it's okay to lean into that tiredness and then try to relax your way out of it and through the finish line, if that makes sense.
Okay. I know it's going to take me a little work to put all that in my head and kind of slowly help some 200 kids. This is the first year I really had too many 200 kids. Most of them are 100 kids, and we can kind of work through that, or football players. So then you're not even worried about the 100. So all these ideas are starting to kind of surface. I know you're going to have, some sprint endurance. You're going to have to be able to get up to a top speed in the time it takes to make everything pan out. And I know there's more to it than just saying, hey, just run a little faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Or that gets into a whole other thing, is the difference between under-conditioned and over-conditioned. You can look at a kid in the 200 and they're giving you everything they got and they're tired and worn out, and then, oh, you're just under-conditioned. So now we go back to what we talked about earlier, starting to dig a hole out that you can't fill. To add on to that, identifying the difference between over-conditioned and under-conditioned.
Yeah. I mean, ideally for the boys, the 200 is taking 23 seconds or lower, 21 seconds ideally in high school. And for the girls, we're anywhere about from 28 to 24 seconds, depending on the quality of your athletes. We're not even getting into oxidative state at that point. So too many athletes or too many coaches are having their athletes run sub-maximal repeat 200s and then tapping into an energy system that isn't even going to be used during the 200-meter dash. So we need to elicit the responses within the energy systems that are actually going to be getting our athletes across the finish line, and not just make our athletes huff and puff and say, there we go. Now we're going to be stronger in the 200, if that makes sense.
Yes, if you're not working in the system that's not going to be used, you're just working in the wrong direction.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So kind of going back to how do you identify if your athletes are over-conditioned or under-conditioned? What are some warning signs from one to the other that you can, like, okay, we need a little more work here, or, whoa, we need to get this kid sitting down, taking a couple practices off?
Yeah. So in Wisconsin, we have 3 divisions for track and field. One is the biggest, 3 is the smallest. Our school is the smallest in Division 2. And because of that, most all of my sprinters are also participating in some other sport during track. So I'm kind of assuming that all of my athletes are over-conditioned. So to combat that, I meticulously plan out my sprint season to ensure that we are only getting those 7 seconds of time under tension a day, which, as Holler says, is the minimal effective dose that I have found for my sprinters. But tangibly, because I collect data every day, if the average like 10-meter fly time is significantly lower on one day as opposed to another, I kind of know that my athletes are tuckered out. Whether it be from my workouts or whether it be from the weight room that morning or whether it be from the other sports that they're participating in. Our track athletes will lift all through the season until the week before championship week. So I kind of have that in the back of my mind as well. Like we're still lifting pretty intense throughout the entire season, and then we back off, which just makes our peak more intense. But I think the major telltale sign is shin splints, and they are my least favorite thing when it comes to sprinting. Shin splints are very easily mitigated if you can plan accordingly. And I've had to have this conversation with a couple of my athletes already at this point of the season. Shin splints always happen because of a rapid increase or too much volume. A rapid increase in volume or too much volume. I had an athlete who had a stress fracture in his shin last season because he was a competitive downhill skier, a track athlete, and soccer all at the same time. And I was talking to his family, I was talking to him, and they couldn't figure out what was going on and why all of these therapies that they were doing wasn't helping his shin splints go away. And I just, the other day, I looked him in the eye and I said, what is the first word of stress fracture? And he's like, stress. And I was like, that's the issue. That's the only issue. If we can reduce the amount of volume and control the increase in volume, the likelihood of that, the tibialis muscle freaking out goes way down. So I go over and above, like I said, on the front end when I plan my seasons to make sure that the amount of volume, whether it's a kid who did nothing all winter or if it was a kid that played basketball all winter, that they aren't going to have that spike in volume that brings on shin splints.
You mentioned the weight room in there. So
yes,
you're taking the weight room clear up until you're getting close to state, and then you're cutting that off to help get that boost in the peak you want.
Yes.
Are you cycling through what they're doing in the weight room, or are you staying at steady volume that whole time and then just dropping the volume out, or are you ramping up an intensity level throughout the season and then dropping it?
Yes. So one of my best friends, his name is Eddie Hodges. He was the strength coach and one of the strength coaches for the Caledonia Warriors football, which is a state in Minnesota. And they won, like, I think they had one of the longest winning streaks in the country at one point. So he does all of our programming. He owns Three Rivers Performance in LaCrosse, Wisconsin. And he does most of the programming for all of the high schools in the area. And he does all of our programming at Aquinas based on velocity. So we have tendos and gym aware units at all of our racks, which is brand new this year. So the way he programs is he kind of follows the base load peak framework just as I do. And we kind of match it because we're not just co-coaches, we're also like best friends. So we track and plan out everything together. So when he is at base, I'm at base. When he's at load, I'm at load. When he's at peak, I'm at peak. And it works out really well. And our athletes come out of the weight room like a cannon when it comes down to state. We always PR at state, which is not the norm. And this is something I wanted to talk about. I was at a conference in January, and the presenter was talking about at the Wisconsin State track meet, only 11% of gold medal winners PR'd on that day. If you look at the Olympics, only 7% of athletes, when they win gold medals, win with a PR performance, which I thought was very interesting. And this comes back to the idea of thinking that you need to try harder in order to do better. Specifically when it comes to the state track meet, a lot of the times our athletes get there, they run their best times at regionals or sectionals, and then they get to state and they're like, okay, it's time to try even harder. And then all of a sudden there's a 2 to 3/10 regression based on what happened at regionals or sections. I think this is not due to poor planning on the coach's part, but poor planning on the coach's part when it comes to mental preparation for our athletes. When I have my athletes run 10-meter flies, we do usually 3 of them. And the last rep, I always say, let's do this one at 95%. And more often than not, that last one at 95% is their fastest rep. And I want to carry that ideology all the way into the state meet, where we are able to perform at 95% and still perform better than we did previously at sectionals, if that makes sense. the way I know this is working is in the last 2 years of the 4 podium finishes we've had, 3 of them have been PRs and 2 of them were school records. And last season specifically, the last 10-meter fly that we ran before the state meet was by far our fastest across the board for a team, following that 95% method and ideology. So helping our athletes understand, specifically when it comes to the biggest stage and biggest meet of the year, that we don't need to try any harder than we've been doing for the whole season, because everything that we have done throughout the season is getting us ready. So we can just come and be confident and calm and collected. And if we just perform well, we're probably going to PR, if not win the thing.
You have to make a plan for arousal.
Yes.
And every kid's going to be different on what their arousal rate is. And some of them, you may even have to try to increase it. They may be so chill, which I can't hardly imagine at the high school level. You run into it very often. Most of them, you're trying to dial it back. So yes, preparing for it throughout the season whenever possible should give you a better result at the end. We touched on the weight room, and I just had a few more questions on that. But so you're talking about when you're at base, he's at base. When you're accumulating, he's accumulating. And then when you're peaking, the weight room's peaking.
Yep.
Are you running velocities when you start peaking? Are you looking at bar speed and you're increasing bar speed? Or are you just dropping the weight and moving up higher in percentages? What are you looking to do to create that peak?
With the velocity-based training?
I don't know if that's how you do it or not. You may do percentages. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how you decide what to do.
I think it's bar speed. I would have to ask Eddie. But I would assume it's bar speed to try to get it as fast as possible. I don't think it's load. I think it's bar speed, which would correlate well because that's when we're trying to run really fast. Or when we're peaking, that's the most volume in a week on our legs. I think the most volume I have in 1 week is 84 seconds this year. So when we're running more, he has less weight but more velocity.
Now, are you starting to cut down range of motion innings, so go to a higher squat that's a little bit more sport specific to help that peak?
Yeah. So Eddie is huge on the Olympic movements. I think he is a USAW instructor, so he doesn't just have certifications. He's the one who certifies everybody else. So he is very good at teaching Olympic movements, and that is like the cornerstone of his programming. So yeah, it would just be way ramping up bar speed and intent and lowering the weight.
And I don't want to get you too far down a rabbit hole that you're not working with. I'm just trying to see how you're correlating with another coach to get the athletes you want on the field. Yeah.
So in as simple terms as possible, when the CNS load is lightest in the weight room, that's when I feel like it's okay to run a little bit more on the track, if that makes sense.
Now, talking about the peak and taper, arousal, and all of those things, as a coach, how have you learned not to panic at the end? I see this in more cases than not.
Yep.
That it's been this many days since we ran this many sprints, and coach gets nervous. So now you screw a peak up right at the end because your nerves get the best of you.
Yeah.
Instead of just writing it,
Yes.
and sending it and see what happens. How have you learned to be confident in the preparation so that at the end you're not trying to make up ground that you didn't even lose?
Right. That's a really good way to say that. One, I just really trust the program that I created to begin with. Every year I write the program up, and then I write a defense of my program that I send to all my athletes, all the other coaches, and all the parents. Because I really want to ensure that the parents, mostly the parents, I want to ensure them that I have a reason for everything that I do with their son or daughter. Being a coach is one of the biggest responsibilities that we can have when other parents entrust their most precious things to you. So I really want to make sure that I'm respecting that and showing them that I have a very precise plan and a reason for everything that I do. So because I do that on the front end, I don't need to panic on the back end because I know why I made all the choices that I made. And I just got, like we were talking about at the beginning, I just got done with my doctorate in speed coaching. So everything is based in research and in literature, as much as possible. So I trust myself, I trust the program, but more so I trust myself and I trust the program because I trust the literature that tells us why things work and why they should work. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work that year, then I just go back to the drawing board. But more often than not, the issue has been 1 year, my first year at Aquinas, the previous year's state champ in the 1 and the 2 was going to be a senior. And it's like getting handed the keys to a Ferrari and just saying, don't crash it. So I was like, okay, how do I take a kid who's fast and make him faster? So his PR coming in was like a 1078, I believe, and which is moving. And I wanted to ensure that he was healthy at the end of the year, first and foremost, but also that he was faster, because there's be nothing worse on my resume than inheriting the state champ and not winning it again. So we had that year, we had 22 minutes of time under tension for the entire season. He broke the school record, the 1, 2, and the 4, and the 4x1. He won the 1 and the 2. But he ran a 10:58 at conference. And I was like, he peaked way too early, which is more the problem that I am afraid of. Not that we're never going to peak, is that I peak my athletes too soon. So I was looking at all the data, and then I was looking at the wind readings that day, and I was like, that was a pretty windy day, which ultimately impacted his time. So I kind of calmed down a little bit, stuck with the plan, and he ended up running a 1071 to win the state finals and a 2138 to win the 2. So it worked. But the question that you're asking of panicking is, I usually panic because I think my athletes are too fast too soon, and then they're going to peter out when it matters the most, rather than them never actually hitting a peak.
I can believe that for sure. The other hard part of that is you're trying to peak a whole team.
Yeah.
And every athlete is going to peak different. You start getting into that Bondarchuk idea. This person over here, it's going to be 8 exposures.
Right.
It's the same, the same relay team. You might have another athlete on there that peaks at 12 exposures.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you just run it as is, or are you starting to see indicators of, or KPIs or something that might say, hey, we know that it's taken you just a little bit longer? Are you getting individualized yet, I guess?
Yes. And this is actually a good segue into the AI discussion, because AI is a individualization supercharger. And taking all this data that I collect, I can plug it into various AI tools, and it will tell me, based on the individual data that I've been collecting, who is where based on the KPIs that we're talking about. So for me, mostly it's 10-meter flies. If an athlete's 10-meter fly has been going down for 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to see that, and I'm going to make adjustments to my program for that specific athlete. But I don't want to adjust it so much that they lose any speed gains that they did get. So we still need to have exposure to max velocity, but maybe the reps are significantly less than the guy right next to them. And using AI and using individualization is the key to that.
So let me build on to what you just said. So you've got an athlete, their time's starting to drop. Kind of been going down a couple weeks, you're on the backside of a peak.
Yep.
How do you decide if it's rest they need or a change of exercise they need?
That's a great question. I always err on the side of rest, because I know that they're going to still get max velocity exposure. So it's not necessarily a change of exercise that I'm looking for, being sprinting, because sprinting detrains so fast. Max velocity detrains so fast. So I never want to replace that or take that away. So if that isn't going to change, the only other variable that we can change is volume. So increasing rest, making sure that their max velocity increases, doesn't just stay the same, but increases, is going to be the key. And if an athlete is coming in fatigued, when I'm doing tech at the beginning of the day, a lot of times I'll do a thermometer check. I say, all right, everybody, give me a thermometer of where you're at for the day. And this is good, this is bad, this is this is bad. So I do a quick inventory, which is a super low tech individualization technique. But if my fastest sprinter is like this for the day, maybe he's going to help me record data that day. Maybe he's not going to do any reps. He's going to go through tech. He's going to get the plyometric work. He's going to get some isometric work. He's going to get those movements that reinforce the proper sprinting technique. and then he's going to help me record data for the rest of the day. So he's still getting some exposure. He's still doing those isometric stuff we already talked about, but maybe he's not going to participate in the sprinting workout for that day. So his time under tension for the week goes way down, but his central nervous system is still being taxed in some way.
Now, you had an article on AI, and I think that's very fascinating. In some ways, I'm scared to death of it. And in other ways, it's going to make our life much easier. How do you balance it where you're getting the benefits out of it and you're not letting it just start to dictate how you do everything?
Yeah. So I work on a college campus, and as you can imagine, all of the professors are scared to death because they think that no student is going to think for themselves ever again, and the skill of writing is just going to go away, and no one's going to have to ever critically think again. I just think those ideas, I understand them, but I think they're wrong. And I think that using generative AI and these large language models effectively is going to separate good teachers and good coaches from great coaches and great teachers. So large language models left to their own devices aren't going to produce very high quality content. And the reason that I know this is because if you prompt it poorly, the output is going to be poor. So if I write into let's say Claude, for example, which is my favorite, if I say create a 13-week periodized sprinting program for a high school sprinter, and I click go, it's going to give me what I asked for, but the quality isn't going to be good. It'll periodize it. It'll be okay. It'll be for a high school sprinter. It'll be okay. But a truly good user of AI is going to know that the prompt is going to be the main dictator of how quality the output is. So my prompts are sometimes 3 pages long. I put in so much information that the AI has no choice but to kick out something that is really good. Secondly, in order to be really good at using AI, you have to be able to have created or have the knowledge to create the output that you're looking for on your own to begin with. The AI should be something that you're using to help save time, not replace or enhance your own cognitive abilities. So the reason that that's so important is because then you can actually do quality control on the output. Whereas if you don't know what to look for, one, you're not going to be able to create something good on your own without the help of AI. But secondly, if you don't know what quality work is, you're just going to trust that it was quality work that I gave you. And then you're going to implement it, not knowing heads from tails or what's actually going on in the program that it made. So that's my really short version of why I think AI is helpful. If you know your stuff as a coach and you can dictate it and articulate it well, AI is going to make your life so much better, specifically when it comes to data analysis. So I take data every day. I collect data every day on a notebook. I usually do it freehand. And then I'll take a picture of it and then I'll upload it to Claude and I have a file of all the pictures of the workout data from the season. And then I just have a rolling analysis going. I'll say, here's my workout data from the day. What are you seeing? Enter. And then I'll go and grade papers for the rest of the night. Whereas before, that would take an hour of my time. But I have a daughter. I have a wife who I adore. I'm getting a doctorate degree. I'm teaching overload and I'm taking overload credits. And coaching is something I'm very passionate about, but it's not something I want to spend 4 hours on every night, if that makes sense. So I'm using the tools, and I'm not a math guy. So it's doing all of these statistical analysis for me on the back end. And then I'll ask somebody who knows stats, be like, hey, does this kind of look right? Or sometimes I'll even use another AI tool. Like I'll use Claude to analyze it. And then I'll be like, how do I know that's right? I don't know math like that. And then I'll put it in Grok and I'll say, is this correct? And I'll use AI to check its work on the other side. And it's 99% of the time, it's spot on because it's very simple stats. But using AI to have a rolling statistical analysis of practice data makes that individualization that you were talking about so much easier as the season progresses.
Yes, I could see where that would help. It's one of those things. I'm not the most computer literate person in the world either. So you stack both those on there. It's a little daunting to try to dig in, get everything you want, and get it spit out where you know, hey, this is accurate to what I want.
Yeah.
I mean, because
exactly.
you can understand how hard it is to try to explain to another coach what time under tension, you're trying to explain to another coach how you come up with this theory,
right?
How you landed on 22 minutes. Now you're trying to tell AI that's going to give you the answer that you really want to make your time faster.
Right. Exactly. It's tough. And that notion of that you just expressed of the learning curve of using AI being daunting. Me and 3 of my other colleagues, we just did a study of over 300 teachers and administrators on their thoughts about AI. And the number one issue that they said wasn't the use of AI, but the daunting nature of learning how to use it was like the number one thing that they identified as being worrisome.
Which I can get it. I definitely do.
I get it too.
Now, going back to what I kind of had phrased in that question, how did you come up with 22 minutes as being the time under tension that you wanted to hit?
Yeah. So I try to, when I think about time under tension for a specific day, I try to guesstimate the time under tension for my slowest athlete that day. So then it's a super easy mathematic process to figure out how much time under tension for each week. So going back to how I plan the entire season, I want the freshest, fastest, healthiest athletes at the state meet. So for a previous year, that was 22 minutes of time under tension for that specific season. For this year, I'm at, I think, about 28 minutes to 30 minutes because I'm introducing more of the 150 meter flies throughout the season. Last season, we only had 1 lactate workout. This season, we're going to do 3. I just thought that our athletes could have been a little bit stronger at the latter half of the race, but I also saw them tense up more. So I wanted to get them used to fighting through that in a relaxed manner. But there's nothing specifically scientific about the 22 minutes or the 28 minutes. It's rather knowing that I want the fastest, freshest, and healthiest athletes. Each day needs to be as low volume as possible. And that equates to each week being relatively low volume. So for this 2025 season, week 1 was 12 and a half seconds time under tension. So that's 3 workouts, 7 seconds-ish. Or no, not even 7 seconds a day for the first week. Week number 2 was 13 and a half seconds of time under tension. And week 3 was 15 and a half seconds of time under tension. Going into the 4th week now, we're going to have about 30 seconds of time under tension, which is a pretty big jump from week 3. So it's not necessarily I'm going into planning each workout knowing we need to hit X amount of time cumulative by the end of the season. It's more so a function of trying to keep each week low volume while following some sort of load or base load peak progression.
Now, when you're in the accumulation phase before you drop off, how long will you be under tension that week or that cycle? It may be 3. It may be 3 weeks. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's 2 weeks this year. We have 65 seconds and then we have 85 seconds. So still relatively low when you're thinking about 85 seconds for an entire week of practice. But again, I'm just trying to keep them as fresh as possible and trying to keep the stress on their legs as low as possible.
Are you counting meets in there too? Because
Yep.
I mean, 85 obviously divided by 5, you're going to be at 17 seconds a day, but you got to account for the accumulation of what the meets are doing. So how does that play into it?
So again, I try to base it off of the athlete that's going to spend the most time under tension at a track meet. So for us, that's going to be probably somebody who runs a 100, 4x1, and a 400, which probably won't happen, but let's say that does happen. So if that's a female, 100 meter dash, let's say our slowest varsity 100 meter dash athlete is going to be like 14 and a half seconds. So that's 14 and a half. Then we have somebody running a leg of the 100 meter dash. So maybe that is 13 seconds, second and a half faster than their open time. And then they're running a 400. And if it's our slowest athlete running a 400, maybe that's probably going to be around 70 seconds right there. So that's a vast majority of the time under tension for that athlete for the week. So if I know that athlete is going to be running that much time under tension for the week, I'm usually probably going to back them off in practice as much as possible, because it doesn't make sense to peak them on a week that they're going to be peaking performance-wise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because you're looking at what you just said. You're coming out to like 97 and a half seconds time under tension.
That's a lot.
Yeah, you've exceeded your overall accumulation week by 10 seconds. So if you're bumping on this you know, 2 track meets a week. Well, now, you're at just under 200 seconds. Practice
Exactly.
is really going to throw a kink in things if you're not careful.
Right. So I think this brings up a good point, though. The example I just gave of an athlete running a 4x1, and a 400 probably will never happen. I usually have my sprinters run only 2 events, specifically in the first half of the year. I think a lot of coaches have just like load their athletes up, but that just loads up time under tension. So for me, my athletes, we just had a meet on Friday, and only 2 of my athletes ran 2 events. They ran the 55 and the 200, which was a total of like 30 seconds ish of time under tension for those 2 athletes for that day. So the meet management is also taken into consideration, and I think very important, because you don't win state at an invite meet, which is what our head track coach, our director of track and field, always says. You win it at the end. So we don't need our kids to be running 4 events every track meet. We just need them to be getting to almost race themselves into shape over those longer distances, because their volume in practice is so low.
And that makes a lot of sense, because if
Yeah.
you increase their volume at practice and then you throw a meet on, there is no time for recovery. There is no time to show the advancement in speed that they would have normally had. They can't overcome the mountain that's in front of them.
Right. As I was giving that example, I was like, this is something that would never happen. So I'm sorry that was the example I chose.
Well, right. But if you're at another school, let's say you're at the school down here where I have a lot of kids go to. I had a girl, Friday, what'd she run? She ran the open 200. She ran the open 800, the 800 relay, so the 4x8, and then ran a 400. Her time under tension's through the roof. I mean, how do you ever get that? You're not going to get that back. And so you reach a point where either you've got to reduce her events, I would think, or not run her in every track meet, run her in every other or something like that. But I don't know enough about it to know if that's how you're looking at it. A distance kid's going to be a little bit different than a sprinter, I'm sure. But, she's kind of teetering right there on that edge.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll sometimes go to a track meet and we'll have our JV kids run, and our varsity kids are doing a workout on the backstretch, and they're not even participating in the meet, to try to ensure that they're not overloading their time under tension for that week.
You've said it a couple times, and it's very important, I guess, to notice, is you're planning for the end. Nobody cares. Nobody cares till districts roll around or sectionals roll around.
Exactly.
You got some medals to hang on your letter jacket, but if you miss state because you overran at meets that didn't matter, what good did it do you?
Yeah. And that point was made abundantly clear to me when I was asked to come onto the high school program that I'm at now. Is I met with the head coach at the time, and he said, the only thing that we care about is winning state titles. We're the smallest school in our conference, so we're never going to win conference. We're the smallest school in regionals and sectionals, so we're never going to win those 2 meets. But if we can get 10 kids to the state meet, we have a good shot of winning the state meet, which they've done many times. So the focus on performing maximally at the end was ingrained in me like you wouldn't believe. And it just fit really well with the philosophy that I had already had.
Now, as we're talking about, getting over your projected time under tension, some things are inevitable. You get an athlete maybe a little bit too much work in. You can't change that. Yep. What can you change to bring them back around quicker? What have you found that helps you get athletes, their CNS restored as quick as possible?
Just giving them Fridays off, giving them that day. They don't even, because we lift on Fridays, so maybe they'll lift and then they'll leave. So I call it a lift and leave. I'll put it in the group chat. Today, workout, lift, leave. So just give them the day off. And then I specifically say, do not go to the Y and play basketball. Don't go to the park and play football. Don't go play ultimate frisbee. So these are things I have to say, because the whole point of giving them the day off is they actually take the day off. But that's a good problem to have. I mean, I like having kids that like to go play, which is a blessing. But I think just being okay with giving kids the day off would make a big difference in most coaches' practices.
I think it makes a big difference in how the athletes view practice as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good point because they know for a fact that if we are having practice, it's important.
Yes, that you didn't just scramble together some program that's built on how you feel that day.
Exactly.
It's just, I
Yeah.
have to have you here for an hour and a half. So this is what we're going to do.
Yes, that brings up such a good point. So I posted my, which is funny that I do this at the beginning of the season for the last 3 years. I tweeted out my sprint program that I'm having my sprinters do so that anyone can use it if they want it. But I always change it. So I don't know why I do this because I'll get coaches asking me why I'm doing X, Y, Z, and then I'm like, I'm not even doing that anymore. I shouldn't have even. But so I think that's funny. But a coach specifically asked, like, how are you filling 2 hours of practice time with this program that you put out? And I think that that's a very important thing that we should probably address is if you are thinking of practice time as something we have to fill, you're probably not thinking about your practice time very well. Everything that you're doing should be very purposeful and not just to fill time. So like in my teaching practices, I'll have some classes that are 65 minutes, but my students know if I get through everything I need to get through for that day in 15, I'm not going to make them stick around till the bell rings or till the end of class. If I get through what I need to get through and they want to work on stuff for the rest of the day, they can feel free to stick around. I'll be there the rest of the time, but I'm not just going to fill time because I feel like it's something I have to do. I think coaches, we should probably be doing the same thing. Get in, do the most important thing, and then get out and let your kids rest. The point you brought up about how to know what kind of rest to give is just, I think, building rest in for the entire year and not just filling your practice time because you got to fill it. If you have 2 hours of practice time, but you only use an hour of it, that's 60 more minutes of rest every day compiled throughout the season. That's a bunch of rest that you're wasting because you feel like you need to fill time.
If you're not careful, you turn this into a job for them. And us being adults know what the job is. You're staying at that job 8 hours. Whether you got all your work done in 2, it doesn't matter. Your employer wants you there.
Exactly.
Kids don't understand that grind, and we're trying to fit them into this. And, you know what it's like. You've probably worked somewhere before and somebody said, hey, I want that done. You get that done. I don't care how long it takes you. I'm paying you for 8 hours.
Exactly.
You might bust that out in 4 hours and then skate out. Your athletes are kind of the same way. Hey, this is what I have planned for the day. I want it high quality and I want to get it done. After it's done, you can leave.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can get a little bit more done.
And not only do you get more done, it's done better, which is what I care about.
Yeah. If they're just jogging or running or whatever to buy time and make you feel like you accomplished something, well, your athletes are never going to see the podium.
Exactly.
We've been going on here a while, and I knew we probably would just from the discussions we had kind of building up to this, and I've had a great time. But let's hit this last thing, and I'll let you go for the evening. But you had an article on steady state cardio versus high intensity conditioning.
Yep.
And we go back to time. We go back to time under tension, but we also go back to time of practice. You've kind of moved towards a more high intensity conditioning over just a grind of conditioning where, maybe less stressful in the long haul, but you're in it longer. What led you to the high intensity?
There was a study, I think you're going to make me pull it out. I think it was 2012. There was a study done on the effects of high intensity, low rep versus steady state cardio. And there was no difference. In fact, the group that did higher intensity stuff for less amount of time under tension actually had better gains than the group that just did steady state cardio, which makes sense because ultimately, as strength and conditioning coaches, think about those words, strength and condition. We're trying to condition our bodies to these new stimuli. And if the stimulus never changes, meaning you're just going to go out and you're going to run a mile every day at the same pace, your body's never forced to change or make an adaptation. Whereas if you're going as hard as you can with full rest, and then you're going as hard as you can again, your body's like, okay, this is something we do now. Let's go ahead and make the changes we need to make so we can be more efficient at recovering, but also be more efficient at the going aspect of the endeavor in which we are participating in, which makes total total sense if you think about it that way. You don't got to be too knowledgeable S&C wise to see how your body would accumulate or would change to meet the demands of those workout styles. If you go into the weight room and you bench 135 every day for 10 reps and you never do any more, your body is going to be like, okay, this is what we do. We can do this well. No need to change. Whereas if you go in there and you change up the stimulus, your body's like, we need to change because there's new demands that need to be met. So this was about, I mentioned to my dad earlier, he's the sprint coach for Holman High School in Wisconsin, which is where I went to high school. And he was doing feed the cat style sprint work when I was in middle school. So he's also a professor. He's actually the department chair of the department that I work at. Our offices are right next to each other. It's awesome. So his doctorate was in more strength and conditioning focused environment. So he has a very good understanding of energy systems, which we talked about a little bit before. And he just knew that if you are stressing this energy system, and that's the energy system you want the athlete to be using during competition, it only makes sense that that's the one that gets all of the effort. And if we're training the ATP system, we know that it's very quick, it's very powerful. When I explain it to my students, I explain it as nitrous, like your little nitrous burst into your car. But then you need to go and fill that tank back up, and that takes a little while before you can press that button and hit that nitrous again. Same kind of thing with ATP. It's a huge energy burst, but it takes a while to replenish. And by a while, it's 3 to about 5 minutes of rest in between. And then you can go full max effort again. Well, if that's what we want our athletes to be able to do, we should probably train them to be able to do that. And that never happens in a steady state environment. So he was doing that. That article was very, I think the author's name starts with an L. But 2012, that article was like, okay, this is giving me the research and the literature to back up everything I saw my dad do. That's what I started doing with my athletes. I've coached at 3 or 4 different high schools now. They're sprint groups, and it's all been successful. And I mean, just look at how successful Tony Holler's been with the Feed the Cats program. There's a reason it's successful, because it works. You don't got to look too much deeper than that.
When I was getting ready for Tyler Franklin's interview, I got to research some of his stuff, and me and him got to talk about it a little bit. But when you start talking about, high intensity heart rate monitors, are you utilizing any of that so you know how long you're keeping kids in certain zones so that you can actually peak that system? You can peak the systems along with max sprints?
I haven't done that on the track. When I was teaching PE, we did that in my fitness and wellness units. When we were in the weight room, my students would wear heart rate monitors. They'd be able to see where they were on the screen with their heart rate, see what zone they were in. They had a goal heart rate to hit each day. But that's not something I've been able to do on the track. That's a good idea. I think that'd be fun. But again, as far as heart rate goes, if we're looking at our oxidative cardio energy system, if I'm looking at 200 meters, we know that ATP is anywhere from 0 seconds to 5 seconds of work. Then we have our next energy system, which is going from about that 7-second mark to our 2-minute mark. And then we're getting into our oxidative cardio. So my athletes are never going to be really expected to hit into those zones. So I don't spend too much time focusing on it, if that makes sense.
No, and that's kind of what I was wondering is, what data could it give you? Could it be beneficial? That way you're not maybe holding them up there in a certain range too long. Or
right, I see what you're saying.
If how hard you're pushing them is actually hurting your next time back around. Let's say, it takes 3 minutes. It may not start out that way, but eventually you want your guys to recover in 3 minutes and be ready to hit ATP again.
Right.
Well, if you can't get their heart rate down.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to get that recovery that you think you're getting. It's almost like using percentages as opposed to velocities.
Yeah, for sure.
It's you're playing with a guess, and every athlete you see is going to be different.
Exactly. So the hardest part about my workouts are keeping the kids rested for the adequate amounts of time, because they get so fidgety. So like when we do our 150 meter flies, we're going to be resting for 5 full minutes in between each. and they're going to be bored to tears during those 5 minutes, but they're going to be ready to go after that. So being diligent enough to actually stick to your prescribed rest intervals is so important when it comes to building sprint capacity. But also those 5 minutes are so powerful because you can actually like start talking to your athletes and creating relationships and figuring out who they are as people. They get to figure out who you are as people. They get to see you as a person and not just as a coach. Those 5 minutes are very good for rest. But I think more importantly, we can actually start making impacts on the kids that we're working with in those 5 minutes as well.
All right, I'll hit you with this last one because it was in one of your articles, and I thought it was something pretty cool to hit on. But if your athletes are slow, how important is conditioning?
Right, exactly. Not that important, because so in football, this happens all the time. If a team performs poorly in the fourth quarter, a lot of times the coaches is like, we need to be faster, or we need to be more conditioned in the fourth quarter. Well, if you're not fast to begin with, you can't be fast in the fourth quarter. So let's go ahead and get our athletes fast, and then let's work on conditioning. And guess what happens when you're trying to do the work it takes to get your athletes fast? You're going to also condition them efficiently as well, which is what that study points out. So now our athletes are faster and they're more conditioned, and then they can perform better when they're more fatigued because they're faster. So it's the classic line that all the speed coaches say now is, if you can run 23 miles per hour, how much easier is it to run 18 miles an hour? So if athlete A, their max velocity, their 100% is 18 miles an hour, and athlete B, their 100% is 23 miles an hour, they can keep up with athlete A all day long or all fourth quarter long with no problem, because their ceiling is so much higher. So let's raise our athletes' ceilings so that they can perform sub-maximally longer, and their sub-maximal is better than maybe another team's maximal.
I had some follow-up questions and you hit them all. So you saved me from even having to read them. So
Nice.
Coach, I've had you on here longer than I probably anticipated, or maybe longer than you anticipated, but it's been a great show and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you for taking time to sit down and talk about this stuff.
Thank you. The last couple weeks have been a lot with finishing everything up and track starting. And so I hope I was able to convey everything in a way that actually makes sense and was meaningful to everybody listening. If not, give me a call. I'll talk for 2 hours more. I love this stuff.
The further I get into it, the more I find just how interesting it is, and the science and the math, and it gets so big on how many different aspects affect a sprinter.
Yeah.
And learning what those are and the peaking and everything that goes into it. I'm with you. I could talk about it for hours. Yes.
Well, I appreciate it so much. Thank you. And I think what you have built is awesome and commendable with just the volume of content that is out there. The fact that yours is able to shine through it says a lot about what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that, Coach. I'm thankful that guys listen and guys like you come on. It makes it easier to do.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, thank you. God bless everybody who's listening. And I hope that y'all have a great track season, great soccer season, or softball, baseball, whatever it is that you're coaching. Remember that you're coaching people's kids, and that is the best and most honorable thing that you can be doing. Make sure you have a reason for everything that you're doing, and then just be joyful while you're doing it.
I think that's a great way to wrap up, Coach. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, y'all.